Look at your body. No claws, no fangs, no fur to keep you alive through a freezing night. You can't outrun a deer. You can't outclimb a monkey. You can't outfight almost anything your own size. By every rule of nature, you should not be here. For most of the story of life, a creature this soft did not last long. The slow were eaten, the weak were left behind, and you were born blind, helpless, unable to walk for a year, which in the wild is almost always a death sentence. Yet here you are, reading this. One of 8 billion soft, clawless animals who somehow inherited the entire planet. So how did the weakest thing in the forest end up ruling the world? The real answer is far stranger than strength. Start with everything you don't have. A leopard has claws that open flesh with a single swipe. A wolf has a jaw that crushes bone. A gorilla has arms that could snap you in half without effort. Line your ancestors up next to any of them, and it looks like a cruel joke. A naked, upright, big-headed animal with thin skin and small, blunt little teeth. Nothing about that body says winner, but look closer at what that strange body could actually do. You can't sprint, but you can run for hours. 2 scientists, Daniel Lieberman at Harvard and Dennis Bramble, spent years studying exactly this, and what they found rewrote the story of the human body. You are built, from your long legs to your springy tendons to the muscles that hold your head steady, to run enormous distances without stopping. And you have something almost nothing else on Earth has. You sweat. Think about that for a second. Most animals cool themselves by panting, and a panting animal cannot pant and run at full speed at the same time. You can. Your skin is a cooling system, shedding heat while you keep moving. So on a hot day, deep in the past, your ancestors could pick a single animal out of a herd and simply follow it. Not fast, just forever. The animal would sprint and stop and sprint and slowly overheat. Your ancestors would keep walking, keep coming. Hour after hour under the burning sun until the prey collapsed from the heat, unable to take another step. Scientists call it persistence hunting. You never won the race. You won the war of patience. But a strong body was never the whole story. Somewhere in the deep past, your ancestors did something no animal had ever truly controlled. They caught fire, and they kept it. And according to Harvard primatologist Richard Wrangham, that single act may have quietly made you human, because once you could cook, everything changed. Raw food is hard to chew and slow to digest. A gorilla spends most of its waking life just chewing leaves to stay alive. But cooked food is soft. It gives up its energy easily. Wrangham argues that cooking worked like a second stomach outside your body, one that pre-digested your meals before they ever reached your mouth. Suddenly, your ancestors pulled far more energy from far less food in far less time. And all that spare energy had to go somewhere. It went to the single most expensive organ you own, your brain. A human brain burns around 1/5 of all your energy while making up only 1/50th of your weight. It is outrageously costly to run. And it could only grow so large because fire was quietly feeding it, meal after meal, generation after generation. But the fire did something else too. At night, it became a wall of light and heat that predators would not cross. And around that fire, safe for the first time after dark, your ancestors sat together and did the one thing that would end up mattering more than claws, more than fire, more than anything. They talked. Because here's the twist that changes the entire story. Your real weapon was never your body at all. It was each other. One human alone in the wild is a fragile, frightened, short-lived thing. But humans are almost never truly alone. The psychologist Michael Tomasello has spent his whole career comparing human children to apes, and he found something remarkable. Even a tiny child barely able to speak will point at something just to share it with you, just to say, look at that, together. Apes almost never do this. Why does one small gesture matter so much? Because it means you can hold a shared goal inside your mind. You and a complete stranger can look at the same problem, imagine the same future, and move toward it as if you were one creature. Tomasello calls it shared intentionality, and as far as we know, nothing else on Earth has it the way you do. A wolf pack hunts together. But it cannot sit down and plan for next winter. Your ancestors could. They could teach. They could hand what they knew to a child who would hand it to a child who was not even born yet. And that broke the oldest rule of survival. Every other animal has to relearn the world from nothing. You don't. You were handed thousands of years of hard-won knowledge the moment you were born, how to make fire, which plants heal and which ones kill. How to track, to build, to sow, to store food for a season that hasn't arrived. No single human is clever enough to work all of that out in one short life. You never had to be. You inherited it. Each generation added a little and passed the whole growing pile forward. A single human is not that impressive, but a chain of humans, thinking across 10,000 years, is unstoppable. There was just one more problem to solve. How do you trust that many people? The anthropologist Robin Dunbar found that the size of an animal's social group tracks the size of its brain, and for a human, the number comes out to roughly 150. 150 faces you can truly know. 150 relationships you can hold in your head, keeping track of who helped you, who owes you, who can be relied on when the winter is long. That web of trust was its own kind of survival tool. It meant your ancestors could act as a single body far larger than any one of them. Now think back to how you began your own life. You were the most helpless newborn in the entire animal kingdom. A baby deer walks within an hour of being born. A human baby cannot even hold up its own head. For years you needed constant care, or you would simply have died. By the cold logic of nature, that should have been a fatal flaw. But the anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy noticed something the old story had missed. Human mothers never raised their children alone. Grandmothers helped, aunts helped, older siblings, and even unrelated members of the group all carried and fed and watched the young. She calls it cooperative breeding, and it may be one of the deepest reasons you are alive to hear this. Because a helpless baby is only a death sentence if one exhausted parent has to do everything. Spread that weight across a whole group, and helplessness turns into something else entirely. It turns into time. Time to grow a bigger brain. Time to learn. Time to become fully, strangely human. And this is the part that turns the whole story upside down. Everything that looked like weakness was hiding the real answer all along. You were born helpless, so you needed others, so you learned to cooperate. You were soft and slow, so you had to think and plan and share the load. The exact traits that should have wiped you out are the traits that forced you into the one strategy nothing else on the planet could match. You did not survive despite your weakness. You survived because of it, and even then, it very nearly didn't work. Around 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano called Toba erupted with a force almost impossible to imagine. The anthropologist Stanley Ambrose proposed that the cold and darkness that followed pushed our ancestors right to the edge of the cliff. By some estimates, the entire human species may have dropped to just a few thousand individuals, a single small town's worth of people standing between everything and nothing. Sit with that number for a moment. Every human who has lived since, every city ever built, every language, every song, every face you have ever loved. All of it comes from that tiny, shivering band who somehow held on through the dark. You are not the product of an easy victory. You are the descendant of a near miss, a thread that came within one bad winter of being cut and somehow wasn't. And you carry all of it inside you right now. That tight knot of loneliness you feel when you're left out of something, that is not a flaw. That is an ancient alarm, because for your ancestors, being cast out of the group truly was a slow death. The deep comfort you feel at a shared meal in a warm room surrounded by familiar faces. That is 100,000 years of firelight still glowing quietly in you. The pull you feel to help a stranger, to teach someone, to belong to something. That is the exact machinery that carried a soft, clawless animal all the way here. You were never the strongest thing in the forest. You never had to be. So look at your body again. Not weak, not a mistake. The living end of the most stubborn, cooperative, improbable survival story this planet has ever told. You are what happens when the fragile refuse to face the dark alone. And every single time you reach for another person, you are doing the exact thing that made you human in the first place. That's the story of how you got here. There's a new one every week. Why you feel, why you fear, why you're wired the way you are. Follow and turn on the bell, so the next story about you doesn't pass you by. This has been another look in the mirror. See you soon.